Hello, everyone. Welcome to another webinar promoted by SoftExpert. Today's event introduces crisis management best practices. The webinar will be conducted by Vinod Menon, who is a senior consultant at Core. He has experience in leading business continuity, disaster recovery, information security, risk management, strategic policy formulation, audit, and compliance. I wish you all a great webinar.
My name is Vinod Menon. I'm a principal consultant working for Continuity and Resilience. Having an experience of almost around 23 to 24 years experience, mostly into banking and finance. I have also implemented business continuity for the stock exchange, Mumbai Stock Exchange, Bombay Stock Exchange. To give you a background about the organization which I represent, it's Continuity and Resilience. We are a management consulting firm offering a bouquet of services into consulting, certification, training, awareness, and also creating simulations and training the online management, for this. Please look out for your mails. We'll be hosting a list of webinars from today onwards. So please keep a track of all your emails. You would be invited. Just to give you a brief background about today's webinar, I'll be covering crisis management best practices. What is crisis management? What is different how different is it from an incident? What are the steps that are involved in carrying out a crisis, in identifying a crisis? What would be the steps involved post a crisis, and how do you react to it? And what are the best practices? Would be covered as part of this webinar. So let's go forward. First of all, let's talk about what is an incident. Before an incident, let's talk about what is an event. Any abnormal situation that is not a part of your business as usual activity, any glitch or any malfunction, you term it as an event. And if multiple people start getting affected by this event, you call it an incident. Now, if this incident, what is an incident? It's an event which is not a part of your standard operation of a service and which causes or may cause disruption or a reduction in the quality of service that you provide or to the customer productivity. That is called an incident. An incident is an unexpected event with a potential to cause injury and which gives you time to respond. It can be controlled. This is termed as an incident. Basically, if you have any malfunction which gives you time to respond, which can be controlled, which may have a possibility or potential to cause injury, is called an incident. Crisis. It's an abnormal or unstable situation in the organization's strategic objectives, reputation, or viability. An incident, if it goes forward and if it has an impact on your organization's reputation or strategic objectives, you term this incident as a crisis. Some of the crisis situations or examples that we can look into would be protests. Now, protest, employee absence or employee inaccessibility, facility inaccessibility to an employee, the employee not able to reach office, you can term it as an incident. But large-scale protests, which would hamper the operations of the entire city, would be termed as a crisis. Same is the situation, same is the example for assault of a visitor or a staff, sexual harassment, criminal activity, health emergency. These are basically, it has an output of having an injury to an employee, staff, or vendor. You term these as crisis situations. How does a crisis occur? You ignore, or by ignoring the signs of danger. Like, for example, if there is a small malfunction or a small, your systems are slow, your application responds slow, you term it as an incident. And if you ignore this, then you then it is termed, it could lead to a complete shutdown of your system, or it may ultimately lead to your customer data loss, or uh, you can say leakage of your sensitive information, which would be harmful for the reputation of your organization. That would be termed as a crisis. So by ignoring the signs of danger, or by denying the responsibility of taking an action, like mostly if you look at the past examples of petroleum leakage, oil gas spillage, where the person in charge has denied the responsibility of taking any action, that will lead to a crisis. An incident that has not been managed well can also be termed crisis, or any unfavorable situation caused as a consequence of management mistakes of omission or timely activity leads to a crisis. How does incident convert to crisis? First, do not have time to an incident and a crisis. It is immediate, unpredictable in nature, and the mitigation plans can be created, but the crisis cannot be prevented. Some incidents that are emerging, like these, can be anticipated. For example, if there is a civil unrest or some situations, public outage, public civil political unrest, that can be anticipated, but actions can be taken for prevention. If these are not taken, these actions are not taken, then is a time when these incidents are converted into a crisis. When incident is sustained for a longer time, they linger on continuity to have a drain on your organization's reputation. A clear distinction between incident and crisis. How can you classify, or how can you say that this malfunction is an incident or a crisis? We look at the different characteristics. Like, for example, if we look at predictability, incidents, these are generally foreseeable. They can and they are amendable to pre-planned response measures. If you have a plan in place, these can be responded to. But a crisis, this is unique, rare, unfortunate, or poorly managed event, or combinations of any such event that can create an exceptional challenge to the organization. Onset incidents can be a no notice, a short disruptive incident, event, or they can emerge through a gradual failure or loss of control of some type. Whereas in crisis, it would be sudden onset or no notice, or could emerge from an incident that has not been contained or has escalated with the immediate strategic implication, or can arise with a latent problem within an organization with profound reputational consequences. If these incidents are not nipped out at the bud, if these are not responded to in a timely fashion, it would lead to the organization's reputational impact, which would be a crisis situation. Urgency and pressure. Incidents respond usually, the span of incident response is usually a short time frame of activity, and it is resolved before the exposure to a longer term or before a significant permanent impact has happened. Whereas in crisis, they have a higher sense of urgency. It requires a response to run over longer periods of time. So when the crisis has started, what are the pre-stages? What stages have to be done? What activities have to be done during the crisis, after the crisis, and during social media monitoring? These are run over longer periods of time. Impacts. Adverse events are reasonably well understood, and therefore they can be responded to in an incident in a predefined response. Their impacts are potentially widespread, whereas in crisis, it can disrupt or affect the entire organization. It can transcend organizational, geographical, or sectoral boundaries. Because crises tend to be complex and inherently uncertain, the spread of impacts is difficult to assess and to appreciate. Scrutiny media. Effective incident management attracts very little or none, mostly positive media attention, wherein adverse events are intercepted impacts are rapidly mitigated, and business as usual is quickly restored. For example, if there's a virus attack situation in your network, or if there is some public unrest in your location, this is an incident which, if handled or responded quickly, would affect, would attract either very little media scrutiny, or it will have a positive impact, saying that okay, this organization has taken care of its incident management procedures. Whereas in crisis, these are events that cause significant public and media interest, with the potential to negatively affect an organization's reputation. Manageability through established plans and procedures. Incidents can be resolved by applying proper procedures, plans, or uh, standard operating procedures so as to mitigate their impacts and recover back to normal operations, which we call as BAU, business as usual. Whereas in in case of a crisis, is through a combination of the inherent uncertainty or potential scale or duration of impact. These are rarely recoverable through application of predefined procedure. It is fighting the fire at the time of situation. You cannot plan for a crisis. It demands a flexible, creative. It demands a flexible, creative, strategic, and sustained response that is rooted in the values of the organization. The organization has to understand what is a crisis, who is responsible to respond to a crisis, who is supposed to take ownership of the crisis, who is supposed to take care of responding to the crisis. This has to be a part of the organization's values and the model. Common features of a crisis. First thing is the situation materializes unexpectedly. You had not planned for it. It was an incident. You had some plans that would respond to, but now the incident has gone out of hand and it has become a crisis, which has a possibility of impacting the organization's reputation or injury to the life, safety, and security of the employee or a vendor. Quick decisions are supposed to be made. In an incident, you have time for damage assessment, you have time for reacting to the incident, and you have time to respond to the incident. But in crisis, the decisions have to be made as soon as possible. You have very little time in place, and it's a high pressure situation wherein many eyes are on you, including the media, all your stakeholders, your interested parties. They all have eyes on you. Urgency of the information seeker. Now, when a person asks you for any information during a crisis, it is very urgent. They expect you to respond to them in a very quick fashion. During a crisis, during an incident, it is only a part or very minimal disruption to your business. But in case of a crisis, it is an interruption to the entire organization or the entire business. It is difficult to, there is a major difficulty faced in communication during a crisis. And because it is a crisis and as it impacts the reputation of the organization, or it has led to an injury of a person, it attracts outside attention also. Impact of any incident, as I told repeatedly, your organization loses its reputation. There is a legislative breach or regulatory violations or sanctions are put in place. You have a loss of stakeholder confidence. It could be your customers, it could be your suppliers, it could be your employees, it could be your employee family also, who lose the confidence of the organization. You have a major business interruption cost, which results in financial loss. There could also be a possible loss of life during a crisis event. So what exactly do you mean by crisis management? To put it in a very easy way, crisis or reputation management is a practice of attempting to shape the public perception of a person or an organization by influencing the online information about that entity. The reason I'm saying by influencing online information about this entity, crisis is basically nowadays, because of the advent of social media and online networks, Crisis management uh, the management is taken care mostly by monitoring and responding in social media complaints. Benefits of an effective crisis management: enhance safety of staff and customers. Regulators are happy, their ethical requirements are met. Mitigation of impacts as an aftermath of an incident or emergency is taken care of. There is an improved awareness in employees. They know what exactly are the measures that are put in place, what the organization looks into, and whom are they supposed to check on the in case of a response to a crisis. Indicates this effective crisis management indicates professional approach in handling contingent situations. It boosts the morale and gives comfort to the investors who have invested heavily in your organization, and there's a reduced cost of litigation or risk to the corporate liability. So when you look at the crisis management perspective, you have multiple stages. First would be initiation of a crisis. Different things come into picture. One is denial mode. A person just denies any information that is secret. He would just try to escape from the information. There would be anger among the people. Employees would be panicked. Stakeholders or interested parties would be very anxious, and ultimately there is an acceptance by the media saying that okay, this organization has not taken care of its employees in a genuine fashion. They have not planned for it. So the potential origins of exercises: extreme disruptive incidents that immediately that have an immediate obvious strategic implication. If there is an incident that impacts the reputation of your organization, if you do not respond to it in a timely fashion, it would be the origin point of a crisis. Those stemming from poorly managed incidents and business fluctuations that are allowed to escalate to a point at which they create a crisis. Like if there is an incident and if you take too long time to do a damage assessment, or if you feel that, okay, this is just a small issue which could be handled easily, which requires no senior management involvement, would also lead to a crisis. Emergence of latent problems with serious consequences for trust in an organization. This basically means that in case an incident is resolved, it could be the result of that incident would have a serious consequence to the organization's brand, value, and reputation. These would be the potential origins of a crisis. The different steps involved in crisis management. First, it would be mitigation and prevention. What are the steps that need to be taken in a proactive manner to mitigate an incident from changing itself into a crisis? How do you prevent a crisis from preparedness? You have to be prepared for a crisis at any given moment of time. Crisis can creep into the organization at any given moment of time. It does not give you time to react. You have to respond in a very timely fashion. And once the response is done, you have to recover back to normalcy once the management has taken over the crisis. So some pointers for effective crisis management: use all the available information channels, including internet, intranet, mass notification systems. Crisis, as I told you, impacts the reputation of the organization. So whenever you feel that a crisis has creeped into your organization, try to, the communication channels are always the most important channels to ensure that crisis does not expand itself. It does not go into other areas. So use all the available communication channels, like you have internet, you have social media, you have telephones, mass notification systems. Just inform everybody that there is a situation and you are at the top of it, you are looking into it, you're trying to resolve it. Provide some expression for concern, sympathy for victims. In case of an unfortunate incident of employee or vendor getting injured, show some concern, show some sympathy. Do not say that this is a part of life, this has to be accepted. You have to show that there is a concern and the management or the organization is looking into it. Remember to include employees in the initial response because these are the people with whom the media people would query. So please keep all employees in loop, inform them what is to be, in what fashion are they supposed to respond in case of any further queries, whom are they supposed to divert the questions to, and who would be the corporate spokesperson. Be ready to provide stress and trauma counseling to victims of the crisis, their families, including employees. If the incident occurs and if it impacts or has an injury to multiple employees, then you might be required to send the peers into a stress and trauma counseling also. Be quick and try to have initial response within the first hour. Do not wait. As long as you wait, the crisis gets out of the hand. Be accurate by carefully checking all the facts. Be consistent in keeping the spokesperson informed of the crisis event. See, the spokesperson would be the front face of your organization. He would be responding to queries and concerns. So keep him informed of what are the responses that have been taken place, that are taking behind the scenes, and keep him abreast of all the situations so that he can respond accordingly. Make the public safety the number one priority. In any situation, please remember that safety and security of people. It could be your staff, it could be your vendor, it could be public in general. This should remain as your prime concern, and it should be number one priority in your list. Preparation and prevention. The diagnosis helps in assessing the company's state, define the symptoms of the problem, and features of the potential crisis. So when you try to diagnose the issue or the crisis, always try to find out what was the symptom of the problem, why did it occur, and what was done to contain it. If it is not contained, what would be the resultant crisis? Diagnosis also helps the management in fixing the threshold for showing uncomplimentary results, determining a crisis situation development. So if you diagnose, you come to know that after a given threshold, this incident would turn itself into a crisis. So keep those keep those triggers or keep those points in your mind after an incident has occurred. The earlier a crisis is diagnosed, the faster the particular solutions are chosen, loss is likely to be very small. Pre-crisis preparation involves planning and creation of structures to deliver a crisis response. As I told you, the most important part of crisis management is communication. We call it the crisis communication. That communication channel should always be open. It should always be open to your stakeholders, your employees, your vendors, media, public at large. Everybody should have a communication channel open for them. So be prepared. So during a pre-crisis, as a proactive step, please try to find out what is the structure, who will respond to whom, how, and when. Implementation of the program by training and exercising, whatever you have documented, whatever you have planned for, make sure that these are workable solutions. So to ensure that these solutions are workable, always plan for exercises, keep on testing these plans so that you know that when a time of emergency comes in, these plans would be fit for action. It is during this stage that the crisis handlers begin planning to avert or actually averting the crisis that had been foreshadowed in the signal detection stage. It's a signal detection stage, which I will touch upon very briefly. Before preparation, there is a signal detection stage that comes in, wherein you try to find out what are the pointers or what exactly happens. What is the talk that is happening across in the around you that might lead this incident into a crisis. So it's during this stage of prevention and preparation that you plan to avert. You plan to find out what are the points and how do you avert those signals into changing from an incident to a crisis. Containment and damage control. The goal of this stage is to limit the threats to reputation, finance, safety, and other threats to the firm's survival. So during a planning stage, you have to ensure what are the threats that would hamper the organization's reputation, or impact to your finance, or safety to employees, and you need to limit these threats. You need to put mitigation plans in place. You have to ensure that these threats are looked into and the risks are mitigated. Bring the crisis to an end as quickly as possible. Do not try to leave it. So try to contain it. Try to contain the situation so that the crisis comes to an end as quickly as possible. What are the corrective and preventive actions that should be planned for to avoid a recurrence of such an incident, or in the end, turning that incident into a crisis? And early containment of a crisis, please remember, early containment of a crisis helps to move into the business recovery phase. Business recovery, post-crisis, focus should be on rebuilding the brand, rebuilding the reputation, rebuilding the trust. Organizations have to make adequate financial arrangements beforehand. Everything has to be planned in a proactive fashion. It would not be in a reactive fashion, because every person needs to know what are his roles and responsibilities. All damages and losses should be accounted for in detail. The proof should be maintained, like photos and videos. Get back to normalcy without losing too much time and money. The more you try, the more time you take to come back to normalcy, the more you would be losing out on your reputation and your finance. Review the effectiveness of the crisis management plan post-crisis. So during a testing, during an exercising, you will be finding out what are the lessons learned, what are the issues faced. That would make and making amendments to the plan. But post actual crisis, review the effectiveness of what you had planned for, what you have documented, and if appropriate, make the requisite updates to your plan. Learning phase, capturing the organizational learning from a crisis that occurred by conducting thorough operational debriefs and extensive follow-up communications with all the individuals, teams, stakeholders that were involved in the actual incident. So this is after the crisis has been contained and damage control has been done. Once you are back to normalcy, then you come to a situation where you have to go back in time, find out what was the incident, why did it turn itself into a crisis, what were the things, what were the highlights, what were the lowlights that have happened, who was responsible, why did it happen, what more training could be given to the person to ensure that this issue does not reoccur in future. This has to be a part of the learning program. In the wake of a crisis, organizational decision makers adopt a learning orientation and use prior experience to develop new routines that ultimately change the way the organization operates. So post a crisis, one of the output would be change in the process, change the way the organization operates. So during an incident, during a crisis, if you come to know that, okay, there were multiple teams that were involved and there could be queries from multiple sources. So this would lead to a change in the process of the corporate team, wherein there would be a special team that would be formed who would be responding to all the queries from different parties. So a snapshot, crisis communication. Before a crisis, always be prepared. Always have a communication plan in place. Who will say what, when, where, how. During a crisis, you should have the warning signals in place, and you should have an appropriate crisis response structure team in place who would, and this team, all the members of this team should know what are their roles, responsibilities, and what to do when. Post-crisis, the entire time has to be given for reconstruction and coming back to normalcy, or running the business back to normalcy so that you do not lose any more finance or reputation. And in the end, as part of the continuous improvement process, you need to evaluate how was the crisis response and what further changes have to be done in the communication channels. So let's go a bit deep into what is crisis communication. This is the main thing or the main activity that needs to be taken or needs to be addressed for crisis management. Crisis communication is the effort that is taken by a company to communicate with the public and the stakeholders when an unexpected event occurs that could have a negative impact to the company's reputation. So the activities that are carried out by the people or the company to communicate on the situation and how things are being followed, how the things are being carried out by the organization, by the team, to the people is a part of crisis communication. Different pillars of crisis communication. Always remember three things: knowledge. Facts replace speculation. There might be a lot of speculation that has arisen during this crisis scenario. If you have all the facts in place, it would easily replace the speculation. It will give a sense of confidence to your stakeholders. Speed. The speed at which you respond to crisis is the main winning factor of containing the crisis without of containing the crisis so that it does not go out of hands. Preempts the possibility of a crisis getting out of control. Ownership. If there's a situation, if you are responsible, if you are accountable, accept it. Accept your mistake, apologize for your mistake, and move on. Do not get into a blame game cycle of saying that, okay, this was not my issue, it was because of so and so person that this issue has happened. Accept it, try to close it out, go back to normalcy, run the show. Objectives of communication. Effective crisis communication strategies will consider achieving these objectives. First, connect with the stakeholders. How the stakeholders should understand that, okay, they should feel a sense of confidence that, okay, the organization will get connected to them in case of any issues. They should give them that confidence. Media should always be accessible, so they should also get a feeling that they would be provided access to the management. Show empathy to the people who are involved. Streamline the communication process. Communication that should go through mail should be through mail. Communication that should be through a press release should be through a press release. Or if it requires face-to-face interviews, then it should be face-to-face. So streamline what has to be done and how. Maintain information security, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Information should be kept secured. Do not always ensure that there is no leakage of data or leakage of information during a crisis. Ensure uninterrupted audit trail. Keep all records. Keep all the records as evidence so that it could be used as an audit trail in case of after event or after crisis forensics. And support multi-channel communications. Do not expect everybody to be receiving mail. So try to open up different channels so that you can get in touch with them through one way or the other. It could be through SMS, it could be through phone calls, it could be through emails, or it could be through person. So always keep multi-channel communication lines open. Whenever you communicate to a person, make sure that you always give them a brief and crisp explanation of what went wrong. Do not give them the wrong story. Keep it brief, keep it crisp. Always have an expression of concern for impact on stakeholders. It is not only injury, physical injury, it would be a reputational or financial injury to one of your stakeholders. So always have an expression of concern when you are communicating. A sincere apology only if it is your mistake. If it is your mistake, only then there should be a sincere apology and address the cause, close the issue, get back to normalcy. Always remember who is your audience. There might be multiple parties who would require information from you during a crisis. For example, the first would be the employees want their families to know that they're safe. So how will you inform their families? Due to some situations like political unrest or natural disasters, the employee is trapped within the facility. The employee is safe, but you also have the responsibility of informing the employees' families that the employee is safe, so that the employees have a trust in your organization. So try to find out communication channels. Families of victims want progress reports on their loved ones. In case of a situation or incident, if an employee or vendor is injured on site, and if the organization has taken upon them and transported that person or the injured staff to the nearby hospital, and he's getting medical attention, the family needs to know the progress updates when and on a real-time basis. So always ensure that this channel is kept open. The senior management wants to know the big picture. What has happened? What would it lead to? And the impact on the viability of your organization. The senior management would like a different piece of information altogether. The media might require access to information and also to need to have an access to the spokesperson. So please try to find out. Other stakeholders might want access to information about a crisis. For example, a competitor, he would say that, okay, I need more information on so and so crisis. So what should be given? What information should be provided to a type of audience? What information should not be provided to a type of audience? Has to be pre-planned, has to be kept ready in a templatized fashion, so that during a crisis, effective response can be communicated. What to avoid? Inadequate inaccessibility to stakeholders. If anybody would like information, as I told you in the previous slide, there are different types of audience. You need to provide them with information. Do not give them a situation where they feel that you are not giving them information or you are not accessible. Always be accessible to your stakeholders. Whenever you are trying to communicate, do not try to complete or try to give enough time to explain what was the crisis and how are you responding to it. Always show enthusiasm in the contact. Do not say that, okay, do not keep up a poker face saying that, okay, this is the statement that has been given to me and this is how I'm saying it to you. Problems with timelines. Whenever the person or the stakeholder asks for information, he would expect a timeline. It should not be too little or it should not be too late. Give them appropriate time. And perceptions of arrogance. Whenever a stakeholder requests information, do not show them arrogance that, okay, you are in charge, control of everything, because customers in the end are always the kingpins. So you do not show your arrogance in front of them. When you're dealing with media, please keep these points in mind. Always respond in a timely fashion. Give the media a clear written statement. Do not give them chance to think about the situation and write in their own fashion. Give them written statements. Provide a competent spokesperson, a person who is well versed, trained, so that he can handle all the situations. He can respond to questions aptly. Things that could go wrong, or in a crisis communication plan, there are some things that you always need to take care of. Always look at things, what could go wrong? What is needed in a crisis? Do you require, so you would require people who would be responding to the media, you would be requiring people who would be attending to injured staff. What you would be requiring people who would be attending to data leakage. So what is needed in a crisis? And what are the key issues that would lead to a crisis? This needs to come in your communication plan. Always in your communication plan, put this point of who is in charge, who has the responsibility, and who will be handling who will be providing the responses to each type of inquiry. We need to establish responsibilities of each of the member in your crisis team? Who would respond to the press? Who would respond to the customer? Who would respond to the employees' families? Everything has to be documented and implemented. What's the strategy? It should be transparent. It should be urgent. What would be the timeline? And the main goal of crisis communication should be to protect the brand at all costs. In your crisis communication plan, you should always identify who is the company's or the organization's spokesperson. The person should be competent and a credible person who can manage the stakeholders. He should not be a junior most person who should have, he should be a senior person who would have competent authority provided with him. The response cycle, whenever there is a crisis or whenever there is a situation, first try to verify the situation. What is the situation? Is it hoax or is it actual? Conduct a notification, notify the impacted stakeholders, activate your plans, assign the roles as mentioned in your plan, to prepare and approve media briefing or press handling statements, release the statement to the required stakeholders, and post releasing, conduct an evaluation on how the crisis was handled. If there is an issue, if there is a mistake that has happened from your side, always apologize. Apologies work when accompanied by right actions. When you apologize for something, make sure that you have an appropriate action that comes along with the apology. Only then will the apology work. It should be made swiftly with huge sincerity and transparency. It is good to apologize, but people are still relying on you to help them get through the crisis. Not before that, not after that. Apologies have a greater chance of success if the transgression is recognized and the transgressor is sincerely repentant. How are the apologies viewed from the other side? People don't tend to judge on the basis of your mistakes, but the manner in which you have owned it. If you look at the example of BP, petrol spill, oil spill that had happened, I remember that it was all going on perfectly fine. The incident or the crisis was under control, but when a media guy interviewed the senior person on camera, the response which he gave was that I would like this situation to get closed as fast as possible so that I can return back to my family. This was a disaster which led to a major crisis, which resulted in the plummeting of all the stocks for BP. So please remember, people do not judge you on your mistake, but the manner in which you own the mistake, you try to rectify the mistake, that's how you are viewed. Sincere apologies in which head, one second. I'm sorry, just give me a sec. Sincere apologies in which the head and heart comes together, fare well in dousing the reaction, and they have a huge chance of success. If the perception created by an apology is that the offenders care only about their lives and not of the people who are affected, then the apology can worsen the situation. Like I gave you an example of BP, oil spill. The words that came out of the senior management mouth was as if he cared only about his life or his employee's life. That is when people started talking negatively about the organization and the oil spill that has impacted the sea life, which was it was like a domino effect that has happened, which turned into a massive crisis which could not be handled by the organization. So always try to ensure that if you are wrong, apologize. And when you're apologizing, make sure that you're quick, you're sincere, and you tell the person that, okay, this was a mistake that has happened, and these are the steps that we are taking to ensure that it is closed and will not recur in future. Social media, when used responsibly and creatively, social media has the capacity to spread reliable, potential, life-saving information. But when used recklessly, it can make a disastrous situation even worse. And nowadays, with every person calling himself a citizen journalist, please try to ensure that there is a special social media monitoring team who takes care of all this and who responds in a very effective fashion. Pros and cons of social media. Most the biggest advantage of social media is it is immediate. Anyone can report the news. Anyone. Everybody has a Twitter or Facebook configured, so anybody can report a news. And this news is dissipated very quickly. But on the other side, the disadvantage, limited space. You cannot justify or you cannot say that this information is authentic. It could be inaccurate. Potential lack of the journalistic integrity. All the citizen journalists putting themselves in the harm's way to get a story. These are the disadvantages of social media. Holding statement. During a crisis, natural or human or technical, interested parties have the right to know. They need to know what has happened. A holding statement has to provide the media the initial statement that sets forth the basic facts about the incident and lets the people know that you are actively dealing with the situation. You are doing everything possible from your side to deal with the situation. A checklist of what should be covered in a holding statement. First is time. Time is of essence. Be quick. Try to make the initial response within the first hour itself. Sympathize. Provide some expression of concern for what has happened. Always use the 5 W's. What happened? Where did it happen? When did it happen? Who was involved? Why did it happen? Try to include it in your holding statement. Content. Make public safety #1 priority. Do not think of your reputation. Do not think of the organization's financial impact. Always ensure that the public safety is the #1 priority in a holding statement. Availability. Always keep in mind, make it a point to write it in your holding statement. When will the spokesperson or the company be available to address the queries? Is it only a briefing statement, or is the person available to take the queries? And if he's available, at what time? This should be included in the checklist. As a summary, I will just go recap on what should be done during what are the best things or the best practices for crisis management. These are some of the things that I have mentioned. Adopt a focused approach. Everyone should have a focus. What are his roles, responsibilities? Always adapt to a focused approach. Have correct information in your hand. Please remember that employees can change their views. But over here, employees need to change their views that, okay, they are responsible for the organization's reputation. So they need to change their views. There should be effective communication channels present so that each and every stakeholder gets the communication that he is expected to get. Delegate this responsibility of communicating with the stakeholders to the specialists. Do not hand it over to novice people. Review the performance on a periodic basis and ensure that there are no conflicts or conflict of interest at the workplace, so that only one statement goes out of the organization as a response to a crisis. I'm at the end of my webinar. I would like to end my webinar. Thank you all.
On behalf of SoftExpert, thank you for the presence of everyone who participated in this event. If you have any questions, please contact the presenter via email To see other webinars, ebooks, and white papers on this subject, please visit our website at www.softexpert.com. Find out more about SoftExpert solutions for enterprise business processes improvement, automation, corporate governance, excellence, and compliance management. Thanks for listening. See you next time.